order. Mr. Bertrizzi, can you call the roll, please?
Lori Krenisky.
Here.
Linda Grossi.
Here.
Denise Brewster.
Here.
Scott Fisher.
Here.
We stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I make a motion to approve the appointment of Belinda Grassi as the treasurer pro temp. Can I get a second on that?
Second.
Mr. Bertrizzi, can you call the roll?
Ms. Krenisky.
Aye.
Ms. Grossi.
Aye.
Ms. Brewster.
Aye.
Mr. Fisher.
Aye.
Motion carried. We also have a resolution to amend the finance and audit consent agenda to add item D, resolution ranking the firms that responded to the district's announcement for design professional services. There's actually a copy of the resolution there also that the board should have. Can I get a second to add that?
Second.
Thank you. Mr. Parisi, can you call the roll?
Lori Krenisky.
Aye.
Linda Grossi.
Aye.
Denise Brewster.
Aye.
Scott Fisher.
Aye.
Motion carried. We have a couple consent agenda items. The first one is finance.
Okay. I have items A through D where I need a motion to approve these items on the consent agenda. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
No, we are adding,
This is added, so it's D.
So it's A through D.
Right?
Sorry,
That's okay. I guess I don't know, the Buildings and Grounds Committee, can you give us a little bit of update on the ranking, anything that you guys want to share with the rest of the board?
There were 4 firms, and we ranked them 1 to 4, with TDA being ranked number 1, and ABG being ranked 2nd, and let's see who was 3rd. Who?
try and,
Yeah,
Was 3rd, right, and then 4th was Pyalaski.
it was a lengthy, meeting this morning. They each had 45 minutes to present. We had time to ask questions. I thought they all did a fine job in presentation afterwards when we were finished. Again, we just got to have some conversation about the pros and cons of each, which we did, and it was a pretty, I don't want to say a unanimous decision on how we ranked them, but it was fairly unanimous across the table between administration that was in attendance and Scott and I as the committee people. So
Was our owner's rep present?
yes, the owner's rep was
He was.
there.
There was a general agreement. The 1 and 2 were basically the same by everyone, and then with a little bit of discussion, we came to the conclusion of TDA. And then there was a meeting right outside because of the vestibule, and so I think there was some further discussion there.
Not with this specifically. It was more about the vestibule project and how the vestibule
Right,
project
I
is
mean, you
progressing.
met out there.
TDA is the architect on that project.
They're
so
the
we
architects, so there's further discussion about ongoing work.
Continue to work with them to complete
And
the
how did
vestibule.
that go?
We are looking good. They're moving along on all of them, and the buildings continue to look different every week that we go. So that they're coming in, and we're real excited about kind of some of the work that's being done along the way. Work through some of the challenges that are there.
On schedule?
We are on schedule. There are some small things that might not be up by, but for all intents and purposes, the doors will be ready to be open for students on the first day of school, and they are on schedule to meet the major deadlines, with the exception of a few minor items that will be installed on and off hours.
So we did get an opportunity to meet the teams that were going to be representative of each one of these firms that were there. We talked about timing. We talked about their quality control and how each firm would tackle that as an issue. So I thought the topics that we covered were representative of everything that we had questions for. And we've done we've done a number of projects before in the district, so asking the right questions, I think we have a pretty good feel of what the questions that needed to be asked, and I thought most of them did a fine job of answering them. Again, it was just comfort level in their presentation style, I think, who you feel most comfortable with. So I don't know if that was your assessment.
Yes, and I think everyone, their presentations weren't quite identical, but they were generally the same. And so, same information delivered a little bit differently. And so, out of all four, if we had to choose any of them, we probably would have been okay. But we came to the conclusion of TDA.
And the timeline doesn't seem to be an issue.
No, I think everybody was on the same page, even our owner's rep, like, had asked about that numerous times, so I think
Okay.
we're in good shape.
The owner's rep brought up one detail that he wanted to make sure was covered, and I'm sure that'll be taken care of.
He did have that conversation.
Okay.
Everything is, he said, he's no concerns.
No concern.
No concerns.
Yeah.
Moving forward, so he was really on board with it. And I, personally, I was excited kind of about having the discussions about this new space, what it's gonna look like in kind of that new CTE space within the campus, and kind of really using some of this new design to kind of really show what we can do with some of that along the way. So it's exciting.
And just to let everybody know, so this is a step on the ranking piece, which now allows us to go and do like a contract negotiation with TDA being the first one. As long as everything works out with that, a contract will be brought on the, I think it's August 1st.
August 1st, yes.
Agenda for actually committing to and working with TDA. So this is just step one, and then we'll be back again next meeting.
And we had considered not putting this on this evening. I mean, there was some question on whether or not we wanted to do that this evening, but since we had decided that this morning, there's no reason why not to do it. And considering that we're on a timeline with this project, we just felt that it would be better to try and just add it as we can, so.
It's exciting to move forward with this, put some new spaces on.
Okay. And will the, as they come up with the design and all that, is that still going to be in buildings and grounds, or would there be times when the whole board?
It will more be through at TDA, the design process as we go through.
Okay.
TDA is going to hold their stakeholder meetings. One of their big things is they talked a lot about getting the right people to the table, so people who are not only just us, but people who are going to be using the space on a daily basis to make sure that they're designing a space that's intended for them as well. So really looking at students, and staff, and high school administration and all that, and then they'll put some drawings together and kind of move that forward.
There will be updates.
We'll have
to the
some
board, though.
updates along
Yeah.
the way, through both board, through both Friday practice, as well as kind of, monthly.
Okay. Okay, so any other further discussion? All right. So if you will call the roll, Mr. Petrucci.
Ms. Kaminsky?
Aye.
Ms. Rossi?
Hi.
Ms. Brewster?
Aye.
Mr. Fisher?
Aye.
Motion carried. We also have items on personnel.
All right. A motion for items A through C on the personnel agenda, and is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, any discussion? All right, Mr. Petrucci, if you please call the roll.
Ms. Kaminsky?
Oh, did you
Sorry, I
say?
didn't hear.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Ms.
Aye.
Ms. Rossi?
Hi.
Ms. Brewster?
Aye.
And Mr. Fisher?
Aye.
Motion carried. All right, that brings us to our work session with an update on Auburn Academy.
All right. I've asked Dr. Malacher to kind of present, and not necessarily kind of lead the discussion tonight on some of the questions the board had after the last time we went through the Auburn Academy. She put together some awesome material, kind of more behind the why, and some of the ideas, including a parent communication plan, a frequently asked question, which we will put on the website and add to it as we get more questions that come up, and really kind of the whole gist behind the next steps along this way and kind of what we are doing.
So you all know I'm a little behind the eight ball because I wasn't here at the first work session. So what you have in front of you is kind of what Chris and Mike had updated me on some of your questions and issues that may have been raised. Let's start by saying I'm going to fully throw myself on the sword and say this should have gone through programs and the information should have come to you before it went out to parents and students. I know better than that. We all know better than that. So I apologize that the board was not made aware of the programming before it went out to parents. I understand why you want to know that and why you want that information when it comes out. So, having said that, what you have in this packet, I don't have a formal presentation. I kind of wanted it to be more of a conversation tonight, where Chris is going to jump into as we go. Mike couldn't be here. He's at, his son made it to a playoff baseball or champion, yeah, some kind of baseball game.
It's that time of year.
So anyway, so the first paper that you have is Why Auburn Academy, and I understand that was some of the discussion and why are we doing this. So there are a couple of things that Auburn Academy addresses. It aligns with the portrait of a Riverside Beaver that we're pushing forward, so that idea of creating communicators, leaders, making kids more self-aware, creating collaborators, lifelong learners. So we address those things. The feedback that was addressed, so several years ago, Patty and Lisa did strategic plan focus groups when we were writing the strategic plan and creating those goals. What I did is I went through and I pulled out from the students and from the teachers some of the bullet points that those groups wanted to see in Riverside. Moving forward with a program like this addresses some of the feedback that we have received, and quite honestly, personalized learning is part of our strategic plan. So moving in that direction, it aligns with the goals that we've set with the district. In addition, Mike Hall did a couple of student leadership groups this year, and I thought there was some interesting feedback from high school students only. So when you look at the student and the teacher feedback, that was from across the district. So the strategic plan information, but the student leadership groups, those are specifically from high school students, and that's some of the feedback that they have given us about what they would like to see in their educational process or in their educational settings. So some of that's here, and then on the back is some research information. So at the top,
Just to step in, those student leadership groups are also a major part of the strategic plan, is each building having their own student leadership group and taking the feedback and incorporating that into how we do teaching and learning and kind of improving what we offer. Sorry.
that's okay. That's what this is supposed to be, so jump in at any time. And if you guys have any questions as we're going through, stop me, okay? I want this to be a conversation if you have any questions about what I have put in front of you. On the back is some of the research that supports going in this direction. So at the top, some of you are familiar with John Hattie. He is a big educational researcher, and what he does is he actually does meta-analysis, which means he takes all the studies that exist, looks at them, and then puts it into one comprehensive understanding. And one of the things that he does is Hattie talks about effect size. And he lists out different things that teachers and educators can do that have the biggest impact on student learning. And so anything that is greater than a 0.4 means that, so at 0.4, a student is making a year's worth of growth. Okay? So if you look at the bottom of this chart, cooperative learning, out of all of the studies that he analyzed, and there were thousands of them, cooperative learning is 0.4. So cooperative learning will help a student make a year's worth of growth in a year. Okay? When you look at some of these other things, and we'll just take parental involvement because it doesn't have anything to do with us, but a student who has an involved parent, that has an effect size of 0.5. So it's increasing, an involved parent increases the amount of learning or progress a child makes in a year. So they're going to make more than a year's worth of growth. Some of the things that are going to happen in Auburn Academy, okay, they're going to be able to accelerate their learning, which you can see is the third one down. Teachers are going to be able to provide immediate and timely feedback. We're going to teach them how to think and how to learn, which are metacognitive strategies, peer tutoring, direct instruction. All of those things are embedded within the Auburn Academy, and they have research has shown they have an impact on the degree to which a student learns in a year. Okay? And I cited it there. If you want to look it up, you can find, I actually have the books too, if you would like to look at them.
Question.
Mhm.
So you mentioned the cooperative learning at .41, and that equals 1 year of learning. Is that the baseline, .41?
That's, no, so I didn't include anything that didn't help with a year's worth of growth. So this chart goes all the way down to like 0.05 of an effect.
I'm trying to understand, when you say .41, that equaled 1 year of
Yes.
learning.
So anything that's higher than that means the kids are accelerating. Yeah, that's kind of, that's what you should have.
Okay.
You should be at .4.
Okay.
Okay, that's what he has found after putting all of these studies together.
And that's what the box is, right? It's a little
Yep, it's a little key.
blurry.
Yeah, yes,
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, year's worth of academic, okay, thank you.
And then at the bottom, I put some attendance research about how chronic absenteeism has gone up over the years. I don't have data that says that Auburn students are more absent than non-Auburn students. What I do know is that we have seen an increase in absences, chronic absenteeism, okay? Since COVID, that has happened. This is one way we can start to address it because the kids will have closer relationships, not only with their teachers, because they're in a smaller group, but also with their peer group, okay? And then the last thing is on relationships and teachers and building relationships with students, again, in those small groups, and that smaller kind of family environment. The research shows that those stronger teacher-student relationships increase student performance and impact student attendance also.
So I have a question real quick. So when we talk about chronic absenteeism, I think there's a flaw like in our numbers, right? Because I'll give, for instance, for me, my son had study hall 4th period all year long, and I can't sign the paper saying he's going to miss 4th period all year because of my job. But when he could miss 4th period, I would come and get him and he'd come home and study. And he's counted absent. So like I got a notice in the mail saying my son was chronically absent. And I think, I just want to make sure everybody understands, yeah, we do, but some of it is really excused absences. If I could sign that paper saying he's going to miss 4th period all year long, it wouldn't have been a problem.
So chronic absenteeism is excused or unexcused, the definition from the state. They're working to fix that as well as you bringing that to our attention. We are also looking at the software.
Okay.
And how we count those type of times because, yeah, that's a systemic glitch.
Yeah.
Or an issue that we need to address.
I just want to make sure everybody knows and anybody that watches this
I would-
that there's some
I would say the
flaws in
same thing
data.
and often occurs with our students who have first block off on a certain day. Research shows that students, especially high school age students, when they get more sleep, they do better and they need more sleep. Well, parents who cannot take their students in late on some days, they often do and sign them, and they don't miss a class, but they're still marked as absent for that time because they don't have that late arrival form signed. I think that's an issue that we do absolutely need to look at and address and moving forward.
Yeah.
And I know there are some things, not necessarily next year, but down the road, where Mr. Hall has seen that in the high school schedule. He's doing some things to work on that, but really, truly bringing that scheduling committee back together to move forward with that, regardless of the method of instructional delivery, but kind of how that looks.
Perfect. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure as we talk about chronic absenteeism that everyone's just kind of aware that that does exist.
And then on the other end of the day too, right? You're saying the beginning of the day, what if a student ends early and they're gone?
It's that's what Mrs. Krasinski was talking about when she signs her student out, 4th period, or 4th block, that's the same way as well. Because we are a blended school, sometimes if those learning experiences happen off campus, they shouldn't necessarily count because in terms of the way that we signed up, we do offer some of our instruction blending currently now. Auburn would be another example of a blended learning experience where we provide more than 50% of the instruction all way from their home, but then the rest of the instruction can be gained at home in that aspect, and that's kind of how we look at it.
So that adds to the numbers.
It does. It's a report card thing where these kids are missing academic content. They're missing time to work on their own and kind of do some of that, and that's something we need to.
Now, here's what I would say where Auburn Academy is going to be beneficial. You knew that it was okay for your child to come home at the end of the day, and you're checking his grades. Some parents may not check as closely, or, you know what I mean? Or their child says, hey, I don't really have anything to do, I have study hall. Where this comes into play is when the kids come back from Auburn, if they transport themselves. So they would come back, and typically one day they would have English and one day they would have study hall. Well, I'm gonna go out to lunch. Mom, I don't have a class, Mom. What Mom doesn't know, or Dad, or whoever, you know, is that they're failing the other 3 classes, or they're missing 8 assignments from the other 3 classes. Those Auburn Academy teachers are going to know that immediately. Study hall teachers don't know that, study hall monitors. Auburn Academy teachers will know immediately and be able to make a phone call home and say, hey, so-and-so needs to come to school. They need to be here during this time because that's when we're making sure they make up those assignments, or they get this work done, or they're getting that direct instruction that they have missed. So there is a little bit of help there, you know what I mean, for students who might be using the system, as high school students may do on occasion.
Yeah, I was just going to ask about the CCP, how that works if they're off campus. Like, is that the same thing?
No, CCP, when a student takes a CCP course, they are marked as present for the
Present,
CCP
okay.
course regardless of the time. And
Okay.
it fills a block of time, but that sometimes correlates with a course at Lakeland. It also sometimes correlates with an online course that's asynchronous that they can take whenever. But for that instructional block of time, they are considered marked here, whether they
Okay.
are or not.
Alright.
And whether they attend the course, if it's physically in Lakeland or not, as a CCP student, they are adults and
Okay.
they are responsible for adult things.
Okay,
The rules are a little bit different.
all right.
The second page that you have is this one that has the triangle on it. My understanding was part of the discussion was what kind of supports will be in place for students if they're in Auburn Academy and they're not being successful. So what I have for you here is the bottom tier is what all students will get in the Auburn Academy. So they'll do a daily check-in, check-out, subject area progress monitoring on a frequent basis, and they're going to create those stronger, I believe, those stronger relationships with adults, because those adults are going to be with them every day for essentially 2.5 hours. If a student starts to falter, some of them, and that's where you move up the triangle, can receive small group instruction based on student needs. So I don't mean, hey, today we're doing, you know what I mean, today is the chem lab and everybody has to do that. I mean more like, hey, you 10 kids, you didn't understand what we talked about in Algebra 2, and I know that because I have looked through the work that you've done. I need you 10 over here right now so I can reteach you what we did yesterday or the day before and catch you up. So that's what that small group instruction can be.
On a side note, small group learning for Hattie's is 0.47.
Oh.
So that's even higher.
A next level might be a counselor check-in. So while we have the teachers checking in every day, if we see other issues occurring, and which sometimes high school students have, it's not just academic, there's other things that go on, we can put that counselor check-in in place. And then there's always the parent meeting option. And then the top tier, if a student still is struggling, we have targeted interventions and supports for students with IEPs or 504s. And we do have an intervention specialist who is part of the core team of teachers that can deliver those necessary accommodations and target the skills that are on their IEPs.
What about kids without IEPs or 504s?
So,
Well, there's-
I mean, they're still gonna get the same, they're gonna get the same, even if they don't have an IEP or a 504.
They would get the reteaching, they would get that middle level because that top tier are students who are getting direct instruction from the intervention specialist. Now, that doesn't mean the intervention specialist can't say, I'm teaching this today and oh, you struggled with this, come over here. So she's there, you know what I mean? And she will help the core teachers make those accommodations for the students with IEPs.
our intervention specialist, especially the one that is the assigned to the academy, works with all students. When we had Mrs. Guge in the high school present, it was not only Mrs. Guge, it was Mrs. Guge and Mrs. Turman, who is the intervention specialist, who will be here. She works with all students, regardless of whether they're on an IEP, a 504, or what, and they will break them up and they work content area. And sometimes those intervention specialists who know some of those targeted ways can help a student who just needs help with a specific concept, not necessarily all concepts, but just one specific concept to kind of get over that edge. they can help with that and provide some other as-needed interventions based on the topic.
Will there be any aides assigned or no?
There's
just
no,
her?
yeah, just her. At this time, now, that's because at this time, there are no students as juniors in Auburn Academy that require an aide. That's not to say that one may not come up, and then we would have to provide that, but
As
the
we-
IEP said that.
As we scale up personalized learning, I would assume that we would have some aides that would assist students who choose personalized learning.
Okay.
Next page, I understand there was a question about a schedule. I really went back and forth about giving this to you guys because I cannot stress enough, this is a tentative schedule. This is probably how they're going to start the year because the teachers are still, again, the teachers themselves are trying to figure out how to structure and manage the time. But I would imagine as the year moves on, it will become more fluid as they understand how to move the groups and the kids, who gets it, who doesn't get it, who needs more check-ins. This is what the teachers have developed as a tentative daily schedule for the Auburn Academy students. So it's just for you to see kind of how those couple of hours would be structured. Okay?
And so their lunches before they start?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so when they come back, they'll immediately go to lunch and then they'll report here. Okay?
I think there was a question about, do they all stay here?
They do
Or-
not.
They do not. So
Well, unless, if they're scheduled in a class, like
Yeah.
if they decide to flex out, if they have, so we had some, interestingly enough, our demographics of our Auburn students have changed. And we had several students request AP classes. We had several students that they can't take the CCP English because that only takes place in the morning. Several students that requested advanced math. There were several requests for AP classes. We've been able to manage the schedule, other than the CCP English, I believe, to have those offered fourth block, the ones that we need. So students who want to take those advanced classes will flex out and they'll leave on the day that class occurs and go to class, okay?
And those who would take CCP English through an online asynchronous setting could take it in the academy through the device and get assistance as needed, which is something that, having a relationship with that teacher really does benefit them, whereas a traditional CCP student might be able to go to a prior teacher, but doesn't necessarily have an English teacher who is a home base for that year to kind of go and touch base with. So it gives them an opportunity for, hey, I have a question on this. Can I get you Mrs. Lucas, while you're here, can I kind of grab you for a second to help with what do you think this means and kind of all that. So it does give them an opportunity to seek some assistance with that as well and continue to be successful.
So can I ask a question? There's going to be 4 classes. They'll be able to get 4 classes in the typical block. They meet 2 days a week, 90 minutes, right?
2 or 3, depending on the every other Friday.
Well, right.
Okay.
But it's
2.5.
90 minutes, right?
Yes,
It's
correct.
90 minutes per block.
For a traditional student, it is 90 minutes per block for 2.5 days a week. For an Auburn student,
It's an hour. It's
one block and then a second half of it because of the schedules that don't line up. So they can only fit the 3 classes. They can fit the 2 fourth block classes and then that specialized English class, but they have to take a study hall the other block because there isn't.
Well, no, I'm just saying, like, right now, as far
There
as
is
the schedule
less
goes,
direct
there's less
instructional
direct
time.
There's less
instruction.
direct
But
instruction.
what's going to offset that is the fact that it is the same group of kids with the same 5 teachers every day. So we can manipulate that time. There is no more seat time like there used to be. And kind of think of it like when you took a college class. That college credit, for 3 hours, you had to be in a seat for X amount of time in order to get 3 credits. That's how they used to give high school credit. That's no longer the case. So we're able to flex that time a little bit, yes. So it is not the same amount of direct instruction time that a student would get in a typical block schedule.
But it doesn't mean that, say, on Tuesday and Thursday, they're not going to be doing that class.
Correct.
They'll be doing something
Yeah, oh, yeah,
related
yeah.
to that
So
topic. It's just not-
here's what the teachers are thinking, that the kids on Tuesdays and Thursdays, the kids are going to come in and they're going to create a plan for the day. So if we were all the Auburn teachers, okay, the 5 of us, each of us would have roughly 20 kids that would check in and out with us. So we're going to get to know those kids really well. We're going to know if you need to, I'm going to use Nick as our, if Nick needs to spend more time on math this week, or if he needs to spend more time on English, because I'm going to have access to all of the information, all of his grades, what he's turned in, what he's done. Nick's going to make his plan. I'm going to check it and say, yeah, we need to retool this a little bit. He can make those adjustments, and then that will go on. That also doesn't mean that there won't be direct instruction that goes on during that time. If, again, there are 15 kids that need instruction in a particular concept, those 15 kids will get pulled on that day, and we'll work with that teacher so that they can better understand what it is they're supposed to be learning. So it's about flexibility. It is, like I said, when you look at this, don't be surprised if you talk to somebody who's in Auburn Academy in November and it's not this. Because we fully expect it to evolve and be more fluid.
Is there a limit to how many people can get the individualized instruction on the Tuesdays and Thursdays? For example, every single student needs help on that topic in math. Are you going to go
Then
back
that's not a small group situation.
Well,
That's
that's what
a
I
direct
mean,
instruction.
right?
That's a
So
direct
we would take them
instruction.
in small, we would take them in
small groups
smaller
that we
chunks of
do
that. So if every
direct
student, we would take them
instruction?
in groups like 15, put them in a more of a setting and say, this is where, this is where your help, you need some help, and then rotate them through when they, again, it's competency-based and personalized instruction. So when they show competency, we move them on to the next task. So we work with them until they show competency, we take them on, we take the next group in, and kind of continue to move with that, and we continue to rotate through as they go. And it may be Tuesday and then Thursday, or I'd have to adapt Wednesday. Our best teachers do that now. Currently, they kind of take those assessments. They use those assessments to drive their next instruction as to what they need. If students have mastered it, they don't continue to beat that dead horse. They move on to the next one. They kind of step them up and give the next challenging things. That's what's really exciting about how these teachers being trained in it, and then the next steps as they go through, kind of working through what those high yield strategies kind of are to really work with, is we're working with small groups who have specific needs, and the needs are kind of similar based on the assessments that I have. The other thing that's really lost in a part of this is our Auburn students who are coming in, our teachers have a little bit of time before they get here because of the way that the schedule is set up. Well, they'll have some time to kind of have some check-ins with, okay, I know that, based on yesterday's assignments, that Nick needs help, that both Nick and Cheryl need help with maybe where to put the Oxford comma and how to use it appropriately, and kind of taking the next steps. And so I'm going to work with them for 5 minutes. I'm going to take them out for 5 minutes today and really work with them to get them set up in the right direction. And then I'm going to go ahead and send them on their way. But I need to have them. So they're going to have that opportunity to have that time ahead of time to really kind of get them along the way. And it could also be with that intervention specialist. So, you know what, I've got a couple who are working on that too, and I know a great strategy for that, so I'll step in and help with that. So I think that it is a teaming approach, but it's working with that teaming to kind of really provide what they need to show competency, and that's the key to it all, is really the basis of it. It's not based on seat time and just it is based on, can you show competency when, and what does that competency look like? And the other part of it is, it's not just like, well, is it set to a high standard? Because that's the other part, is it's competency-based instruction based on a high goal, and not just this is what it is. This goal needs to be up there. And really, competency, what does it look like? It looks like 80%. Are you getting 80% of this or higher? That's really, to put some math numbers to it. It depends on what the standard is, but how are we moving for that and how are we moving it forward?
And who sets that standard? And then when you say show competency, I know you said show, but you also said an example of 80%. Is that a physical test? Is an assessment, a subjective assessment by the instructor?
Oh, yeah. The students are going to take the same assessments. I mean, there's still common assessments across the board that will be given.
A test?
Yeah. It's like for example, in math, they're still going to take the end of chapter test.
So when someone needs help, are they then going to retake a test or a different test until they reach a 80% or whatever?
So it could look like that. It could look like, okay, if this is the assessment I'm using, and we use 80% as kind of for the whole group. So 80% typically shows, that's our basic tier 1, the green part of the triangle, if you would. That means that our instruction is up to par and where it should be. That's kind of the goal universally as to where we go. It's the next 20% that we kind of take them into the next specific small groups, those sorts of things. But if my instruction is 80%, I'm good. But as I'm grading my assessment and really looking at what a good high-quality standardized assessment is, and that's one of the other things we're working with our departments to write these high-quality assessments. It's not specifically, it may be, let's say, the assessment on, I'm trying to use on fractions for math, and obviously they're not using fractions, it's a much higher level, but if I'm using that, there are different skills in fractions, but each of my questions are based differently on that. So if I'm using the right assessment creator, kind of working through that, I know that questions 1, 5, and 7 are about multiplying fractions, and questions 2, 3, and 4 might be about dividing fractions. So I can see that, in terms of where this breakdown is, it's not just specifically fractions in a journal. I'm really diving into these 4 students have issues with multiplying fractions, whereas these 4 students have a little bit more issues with dividing fractions, or the whole class. There may be something in a class standpoint where I really struggled with in terms of presenting this. They didn't get it. Something didn't click in what I have. Maybe it was a bad day. Maybe the way I tried to teach it was wrong. So going back to the drawing board and kind of drawing it up and saying, as a whole class, we need to kind of redo this. So yeah, it is an assessment. In an English class, it's not. I would say the assessment is a piece of writing. I mean, writing is thinking on paper. So how do we do with writing? What does that look like? But that's graded by a rubric. It's not always graded by a multiple choice answer or that sort of thing, or one answer. There's really, are your thought processes there? Are you kind of hitting all these things? Are you kind of working it out? But that rubric and that standard is all there. Science would be the same way. It would be some sort of assessment, whether it's a lab assessment, a lab report, whether it's some sort of experiment, kind of what we're coming out with, whether it's a combination of all that would exist in government as well. So the classes that they're existing, those assessments are common, whether they are in here or whether they are out in a traditional setting. And I think that's one of the keys to it is the expectations are the same regardless of where they are. The method of delivery is a little bit different, but even in our different classes, that method of delivery depends on the teacher comfortability, teacher familiarity, but we're still going to assess them on the same methods to make sure that we're hitting those high standards.
So it will be subjective to some degree. I know that when Mr. Hall was here, and the question I had was, what about that students who are performing at the lower end? And he said, well, there will be different teachers available, and the opportunity for more individualized instruction to catch up. And my question was, when do you catch that? When do you become aware of that? Because once you're in, and I just picked a generic number, once you're into the class 7 or 8 weeks, it's kind of hard to go back. Because part of the statement was, well, they can be replaced into another environment where they can be successful, or they might not be successful in this particular environment. So if we allow too many weeks to go by and we don't catch that student's in trouble. And so he said he was going to think about that because he didn't have that plan right now. So right now what I'm asking is, do we have a plan to catch those students that aren't quite making it?
That starts with a daily check-in. That starts with the schedule that's there. That starts with kind of the green, some of the green initial things that we had talked about, the daily check-in, check-out, subject and progress monitoring. Those are, so when a student struggles in a typical traditional teacher-led class, the first things when we figure out, and it's usually after 9 weeks that they're not doing so well, or as we put grades in. So those are some of the first intervention things that we start to work with. We've already incorporated those into the very beginning. So that will start from day 1. As well as kind of moving forward as to where they are. So when we know that we'll know a lot sooner in here that they're not being successful and that this may not be the method for them because of the relationships we formed with them. And also flat out asking what is going on, and why. And students, I will tell you, are pretty honest with you when you ask them flat, and they'll say this just isn't for me. Okay, we'll go ahead and rebuild their schedule and come out with it. And we would do that a lot earlier than we would in a traditional setting, or in a traditional setting, sometimes it's, well, we'll put some of these in place and you got to pass it in the credit recovery. And that's one thing that we don't, unfortunately, that's where that's there. Whereas these, we're starting with a lot of the interventions built in that we would put in our traditional class in a setting like this, with a lot more results that are there.
Yeah, I think this has a lot more opportunity to
That's exactly the word we came to the
catch
last time.
them sooner. They're checking all the time
Yeah.
and reteaching. And so it isn't like you're in a big group lecture thing and you could coast for a while and then be on.
Or sink or swim, and that's
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
Or you leave after 90 minutes. You know what I mean? In a typical setting, you leave after, the students leave after 90 minutes, you know, the class leaves. And I don't know what you're doing. If I'm your English teacher, I don't know what you're doing in math. I don't know what you're doing in government. So this way, those teachers are in constant communication and they know everything that's going on with the 20 students that they're responsible for. So there's no falling through the cracks on this one. So now what I will say is that what that looks like, if it's not working for them, I think we're going to have to build it a little bit as we go. Does it mean going right back into the traditional classroom? I'm not entirely sure. That's a great option, you know what I mean, to throw you back in and let you kind of sink or swim out there on your own. But I think there's maybe somewhere in the middle. Maybe this creating your own plan isn't the best way to do it. Maybe it needs to be more structured, and what does that look like when you're in here? So I think that will grow as we go through the process, but I think we're going to catch these kids a lot sooner that have typically fallen through the cracks.
Thank you.
Next page you'll see is the parent or the communication plan. So May 28th is when we did the student meeting and the parent letter went home, which you're all aware of. June 13th is when the concept was introduced to you guys by Chris and Mike. Today's meeting, which was program clarification. One of the things that Chris and Mike are going to do is they're going to do a video for parents and students, probably get it out, I would say, by the end of the month. is
We
the
had
goal.
hoped to have it for today. There were some things
Yeah,
that kind
that's-
of came up between the last.
And summertime schedules are kind of not meshing perfectly. But they're going to talk a little bit about what the program is, a little bit about what we've presented to you here today to give a little bit more clarification to students and to parents. On August 6th, we have a parent meeting scheduled for incoming Auburn Academy students. So we thought doing one earlier in August so parents have some understanding and some clarification before their students come back to school. They'll know what to expect. And then we also are going to repeat that at open house for Auburn parents. So if you can't make it early in August or you miss it or whatever that is, and we will send more information out about that the date, the time, the location, all of that stuff will go directly to those junior Auburn parents. But we will repeat that meeting at open house for anybody who may have missed it.
When does Auburn start this year? Like, what's it?
I don't
They're
know.
not on our schedule.
No, they are not.
They're
Usually,
a week before.
Yeah, usually they start, they might start the 19th, which is the day our teachers come back, but our kids don't come back till Thursday. So, but I'm not sure, to be honest with you. And then the last page is some frequently asked questions. These were your questions. Those were the frequently asked questions at the time that were given to me because nobody else is really asking any questions yet. So we did our best to answer these as a team. I'm sure this is going to go on the website, just so you know. Okay, this frequently asked question piece. And we will add to it as questions come in, but it's just information. A lot of we have already talked about just here. So, just general information.
How will we know that the program is successful?
So, we'll look at test scores and we'll look at attendance rate, okay, as compared to non-Auburn juniors, okay? But I think that part of what we're also talking about looking at students who have to retake some of the state tests because we haven't always done a good job of providing intervention and tutoring to those students who have to retake the Algebra 1 and the English 2 test. So we're going to have some opportunity to do that. So I'd like to look at those scores too, because those are the 2 tests necessary for graduation. If we can increase that. The other thing we've talked about is doing a climate survey. And all of this is related to student learning, but it's also related to some of these other things that we talked about, which is engagement in school, coming to school, attendance, relationships with teachers. So we're talking about doing a survey at the beginning and a survey at the end of the year to kind of see where we are with those students.
Will we be able to take some data from students who have been juniors last year, the year before?
Yes, I already asked Mr. Hall. So we just haven't been able to pull it together, but yes, I want to compare that.
Like what our growth
Yep,
is?
yep. That's what we'll look at.
That will be interesting.
Mhm. Yes, I thought so too.
Okay, and I assume that the teachers will develop some type of orientation, walking the kids through.
So
how this
here's
works.
an interesting thing. We're going to call it a unit 0, and this is where, so they're going to spend the first couple of weeks, and that's one of the things in the frequently asked questions. If I opt out, can I opt in, let's say a month from now, when we realize this is a really great option and my kid is angry because they're not a part of it? That first 2 to 3 weeks is going to be spent teaching kids routines and procedures. And so if you decide that you're going to opt out, this year, we're going to say you can't jump in at the, you know what I mean, in a month or 6 weeks. So opting out means we're going to opt out for the year, okay? What they're going to do though, and that's what that unit 0 we're calling it, where they spend those first 2 to 3 weeks working on some content, but most importantly, creating those relationships, building that rapport with whoever your mentor teacher is, and teaching them the procedures for moving around the room. How do you come in here? What do you do? What are we going to do when it's time to change direct instruction? Where do you go? You know what I mean, for these types of things. So yes, all of that is what they're going to spend the first couple of weeks on.
Okay, so they don't, other than the meeting they had in May, they don't need anything else
Nope.
prior to that?
Kids don't need anything. Just show up here like they usually do on the first day.
Okay.
We'll take it from there.
Okay.
And then I think one of the questions I had asked Mr. Hull was on the feedback portion. Is that going to look different than the feedback portion for our other classrooms? Well, I mean, I'll just be honest. We've had issues with feedback and giving students feedback timely, and we are saying that this is going to be different. But it shouldn't be different because everybody should be doing that, quite frankly, right? Like, so how are we going to hold people's feet to the fire within this program and externally, not in this program, to make sure that feedback, because feedback is important.
Agreed. I think some teachers historically have always done it better than other
Right.
teachers have. I will say these teachers were selected, number one, because of the relationships they build with kids, and number two, because they have had extensive training in personalized learning, with the exception of Mr. Ishmael, who is going this year to training. So they are all, have been trained in personalized learning and working through that. What I will say to that is that's something that we work on continually. I will say I'm very confident that the students in Auburn Academy, with the teachers that they have, I'm not worried about the feedback those students are going to get because they're going to be in constant contact with those teachers. We continue to work every year on improving our feedback, and it's not just grades. It's more than that. It's more of, a formative feedback that you're talking about in our regular classes.
I think too, conceptually, when you look at competency-based personalized learning, which is what we are shifting to, and again, this is a pilot for a much bigger lift that we are looking to do next year and then in the future, because this really does and will impact student learning if offered as a choice. It's not going to be the solution for everybody. There is still a place where some students do appreciate that traditional class and that setup, but what we are finding and come through others and even discussions with other districts is that there are students who are selecting this because this is the way that they learn best, they enjoy, and they learn deeper that way, and they're seeing great results with it from all students across the board. So I think as we shift to this, what we'll learn, part of it is feedback drives the learning, and that feedback is important for the learning that you need, because if you don't get that feedback, you don't know whether you've mastered it. And so you have to have that feedback in a timely manner so that you can either move on or you can get the remediation that you need to kind of continue on to get to that mastery that is there. And it's more personal, it's more individualized, and it kind of fits that. So if you're not going to do that part of it, then you can't be a part of this program, and you can't be a part of this
I guess I'm not
strategy.
even talking about maybe even this program, it's just feedback in general, overall, throughout the district is something that just
That
is
is
critical,
a-
and we need to work on it, and I want to make sure that we're going to be not just holding these teachers accountable to feedback, but all teachers.
That's a
right?
discussion that comes up even more as to how we report what feedback looks like. And that's for another day and another time, and a whole lot longer of a meeting as we get to how we report grades, what feedback looks like, kind of what this looks like, what is competency-based versus, okay, yes, you just did it. That's a whole different strategy that we are shifting and slowly trying to get to. But that requires a whole bigger bite of the apple. But it's down the road, because yes, I would agree, that is
Been
something we
talking
need to
about it
continue to improve upon. That elephant's pretty big. We're gonna get it one bite at a time, and we're starting with just, hey, here's what we have it. I think when we get even some of the climate survey piece back from those students from Auburn Academy, and just the buzz around it, it's gonna be like, yeah, I wanna do that, I wanna be a part of it. That's gonna really stir into the next portion of what it looks like next year and building the schedule next year as it shifts, because the question that I have when we sit down and talk about some of these great ideas and some of our is, that's awesome, but now where's the space for it? And so where are the spaces? And so when we talk about educational spaces and moving forward, if this is the learning that was really impactful and effective, what are the spaces that we're putting in? That's really excited about this CTE lab. That's a great space as we kind of renovate through. That's 2 years out. We're moving ahead, but we have a group of juniors who are going to learn in one way. We're going to expect that their senior year. Can we continue that on? What does that look like? And how do we scale it up? And increase our capacity within the environment that we have. We've got some ideas. We're hoping to kind of build upon those and make it even better as we go. And so
They're going to be here though, in the
they are
media
here.
center.
They're in a chemistry room, English room right there. They have the access to the English room there.
And Mr. Ishmael's room.
They'll
is
also
open in the
probably- I will
afternoon. So if they
probably
need to
bet-
go small group and take them out of here, they have places they can
And
go.
I think Mrs. McIntyre probably has a plan period off at the end of the day as well, that she typically does, so they'll take over her classroom as well, because they do. So they will be, they'll have some spaces to kind of move around.
We did get some dividers for in here too, so we can create some smaller spaces, you know what I mean? Or kids who
These-
need to kind of just concentrate and want to separate themselves from the group sometimes. So we're looking at all of those things, trying to accommodate those learning
These
styles.
boards are touchscreen boards that they're wirelessly projected to, so they can kind of move around, set up in different spaces. They can use them as whiteboards, so they have all of that. We happen to use them for a board meeting, but they have all different kinds of
So-
use for them.
Sorry. Are there students who come down here to use the library? Like, if no one comes down
Not
here?
like they used
Not-
to.
Not like they
So
used to.
it
Not
will
like
be
they used
open
to.
in the morning for
In
classes
the
who want to
morning,
come
but
down,
not-
but really there's not, I mean,
Okay.
if you're doing your research, you're doing it on your Chromebook and it's not
Okay,
necessary.
you don't have to visit.
We also have in the morning, that's when our side classes run, our leadership classes, but they won't be in here in the morning. So
Okay.
the classes that are still using it on a more frequent basis.
So for next year, we're okay.
Yes, we are, we
Okay.
have made sure that it's.
It's the year after. we're
Yeah.
okay.
When you talk about scaling it up, I saw a presentation by a school who allows students to apply to this kind of program, and they apply as freshmen to stay in it for all 4 years. They take, maybe 50 kids, because I think they maybe have 200 kids in the program, because that's what their space can fit. And they said the kids are clamoring, like, to fill out the application. And it's not about the smartest or the most adept, you know what I mean, or the highest achieving student. It's about the mindset. Do you want to work in this environment? That's what they look for. And then they kind of interview the kids. It's a big deal. It was a really cool thing, and they've been doing it for like 7 years. And the teachers that are involved in it, they're like, the relationships that we create with these kids, they don't, you know what I mean, like, they're unbelievable, because we see them all 4 years. Because once they're accepted into the program in 9th grade. So it's a different approach than we are, but when we think about potentially how do we do this with other students, that's a school that next year I want to either go visit or have a more lengthy one-on-one conversation with those teachers and that administration to see how they implemented it.
What school is it? I didn't think that. Sorry.
It's in Cincinnati, and I can't remember, or in that area, Cincinnati-Dayton area, and I can't remember what the name of it is. But I happened to be at a personalized learning presentation, and they were on a Zoom and talking about it. It was really, really cool.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If you have any other questions, don't hesitate to email me, okay, or call, or whatever.
All right. So we'll, real quick, our next meetings, Buildings and Grounds Committee meeting is July 16th at 7:30 a.m. Finance, Audit, and Personnel Committee meeting is July 18th at 7:30 a.m. Curriculum and Programming Committee meeting is July 18th at 8:30 a.m. Buildings and Grounds Committee meeting is July 30th at 7:30 a.m. And Board Education meeting is August 1st, 2024 at 6 p.m.
Oh, the meeting on the the Buildings and Grounds meeting on the 30th is another half day.
That's the other.
The other interview process.
All right. So I'm going to make a motion to adjourn to executive session. So be it resolved that the Riverside Local School District Board of Education hereby adjourns to executive session at 6:56 PM to discuss personnel matters relating to the appointment and/or employment of public official in the Riverside Local School District Board of Education, hereby designates all matters discussed in this executive session as strictly confidential and finds that this designation is warranted because of the status of this matter and the need to preserve confidentiality to properly conduct the business of the Board of Education. Can I get a second,
I'll
please?
second.
Thank you. And Mr. Patrizzi, can you call roll?
Mr. Kresge?
Aye.
Mrs. Rossi?
Aye.
Mrs. Brewster?
Aye.
Mr. Fisher?
Aye.
Motion carried. Thank you.